Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow, and welcome to another edition of Tech Takeaways. And on this week's show, the first thing that I'm going to do is welcome back, because he was missing last time, our very own Jason Fitzgerald. Hi, Jace.
Hi, I'm back, baby.
Indeed. It's nice that you call me baby.
Yeah.
I'm pleased. Do you want to tell people where you've been, or should we keep that a secret?
Yeah, no, I've been on paternity leave.
What?
He's Miles is his name, and he's 29 days old today. So, yeah, I've had a fun month of no sleep. So,
Excellent. Yeah. So, desperate to get back in the podcast studio to do something that doesn't include
it's
nappies.
It's quiet in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe could have brought Miles, and he might have got some kip in here.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah.
It'd make a great episode.
It would, and it would be a first for you. So, Jace, welcome back. It's good to have you back. So, we've got one in Jason. We've got no Wayne this time, but that's because Wayne's away on his own little special ops, not having babies. Though I think it's just important to point out. On this week's show, one of the things we wanted to pick up on was something we touched on a recent-ish show where we talked about Microsoft Copilot, and that's to look at this kind of topic of AI governance, and the idea as people are increasingly looking at adopting AI, what are some of the things they need to think about in terms of the way they use their data, the way they build their kind of compliance policies and procedures? We're not going to go into tons of depth. We've only got kind of 10 minutes to talk about it, but we thought it might be useful to give a few tech takeaways on some of the areas that we've seen so far where people are starting to look at AI governance and some of the considerations they have. So that's kind of the episode we're going to do. So if you're into AI, and hey, who isn't, this is the show for you. So Jay, let's start with you. In your fuzzy baby brain, what are your kind of initial thoughts around AI governance?
Yeah, I mean, AI governance is one of these things that needs to be addressed up front before the technology starts to become wider adopted, because once you start to rapidly adopt it at scale, be it within an organization or be it another AI tool comes out, that suddenly everyone is like what we saw with ChatGPT, everyone's doing their homework with it. Once it's got too far, it's hard to rein back in. So really the thought and the planning of how you're going to use AI as a tool needs to be put in place before you're using it as a tool, essentially. So things like we've seen in the news quite a number of stories around ChatGPT leaking sensitive competitor information or secret source recipes kind of thing to competitors because of the way that they asked questions. So data privacy is obviously a big concern with that. Thinking about what data you're going to allow people to put into that, but being aware of probably how secure that data is when you put in it. If we look at Copilot, we've spoken about Copilot quite a lot. The way that Copilot works is in that kind of secure enclave almost with your organizational data. So you're paying for that as a product, but you can be fairly safe that it's not leaking it out to a competitor. If you put the same questions into, say, ChatGPT or something else that is using your data to learn from and change the model, is your data inadvertently got to be exposed to a competitor? Yeah, it may be. They're the news stories that we've seen, isn't it? ChatGPT kind of exposing the questions that people have asked, and a question had sensitive information in. So, data privacy, data security is always there.
Maybe just jump in on that as well. I think there's probably two areas that people will want to think about as well, because I think Copilot's a really good example for this. Yeah. So there's almost two areas you might want to think around with this as well. So there is the use of some kind of learning model, some kind of AI learning model operating inside of your organization. So the things you've just talked about, absolutely right, in terms of, what data are they looking at? Should they be looking at that data? What security is around that data that model, has been, the data it's been used to train, how are we securing that? And is it the right and relevant data? So I think you've got that at one end. Then you also touched on that kind of the other piece, which is using external learning models, external generative AI normally when we talk about ChatGPT, but using those external platforms, how are we controlling the information that goes out to those platforms? So I think there is so maybe almost takeaway number one with this will be consider your thoughts, right? So if you are adopting a Microsoft Copilot, for example, think about what you need to do internally, but also think about that kind of piece around there are these external tools out there. What are we doing to secure and govern their use?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, kind of continuous evaluation with this one, play it by ear, because...
Can we get AI to continuously evaluate the use of AI?
Yeah. Like you don't know how people are going to use a tool until they're using a tool, and people may change the way that they're using AI as a tool, and the change in use may expose additional risks. So definitely, it's not a set and forget thing. It's probably a continue to evaluate that one. I think governance is probably behind where it needs to be. I would say not just in organizations adopting the technology, but kind of like wider, government frameworks on it as well. AI use is currently pretty much unrestricted. What people develop that tool into is entirely up to them, kind of thing. So I think governance needs a bit more focus, not just at government level, but also within organizations to say this is a tool that people are going to use. There's no stopping it. Even if you were to say we're not going to use AI, people will use AI. They'll download it onto their phone and they'll have a conversation with ChatGPT. That it will happen.
Yeah. Well, I think you raised another good point as well in that. That kind of, because you mentioned it right at the beginning, that the time to think about data governance with AI is not once you've started to roll AI out at scale.
Yeah,
because that's going to be problematic in itself. I mean, I think there's a difference between maybe 2 or 3 people in an organization turning Copilot on and going, what could we do with this?
Yeah.
Because I think the other thing that you mentioned, which is a really good point with this as well, is that partly because people don't really know what they're going to use some of this. Some people will. Some people have an idea of where AI can be, transformative inside of a business. But I think for most people, and I certainly know it's the case for us, is how can we use this and what can we use it to do and how can it help us be more efficient and more effective?
That's the one. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And AI kind of removes some barriers as well. So if we're looking at it as a commercial entity to say, okay, how do we develop faster? How do we get to market quicker, or how do we become more profitable? That's the focus for the business. Are we turning a profit? Are we turning these projects around quick enough? And people will naturally go and explore tools, and will inadvertently start to use AI as a tool in that way. So the focus around security and productivity, it's the same seesaw as cybersecurity. One end you're really secure, but you're not very productive, and at the other end you're wide open and you're not very and you're very productive. And it's about finding that right balance. And I think AI is probably the same.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point as well. And that idea of maybe another takeaway for this will be the piece you've just touched on is have an idea about why you want to use these tools. So if you're going to adopt, we keep talking about Copilot, but if you're going to adopt Copilot or an equivalent, Microsoft Copilot, if you're going to adopt that or an equivalent, it's to think about what is it that you're trying to do with this? So what are the outcomes for this? Because I think if you don't know the outcomes, it becomes more difficult to govern the use of data, because if you don't know the answers that you want necessarily, then how do you know which data to point your kind of learning model at?
It's about strategic use of AI, isn't it? If you don't have that model, it's just a plaything and people will just play with it. I went to NetApp Insights back end of last year.
Heck, we did a show on that.
We did a show on it. And
available in the list of shows.
Available in the back catalogue of tech takeaways. So there was a lady there called Jen Eastley who spoke. So she's from an organisation called CISA, and they're doing a lot of work with US government around what governance in AI would look like. And I remember writing down this quote. So she said, leverage the power of imagination, but avoid the pitfalls of it. And that summarizes AI quite well, I think. You want to use it, and you don't want to say no to people using it, but it's about using it carefully, I think. And kind of, I suppose one thing that we've got to touch upon is, we've spoken about data, but kind of like ethical and bias as well. If you've got a chatbot on your website, be conscious about how it might weight different responses based on inputs that it's taken from your website. You've got to be careful that it's not giving different groups of people different answers based on what it perceives to know about them. We've seen it with I think it was Canada Airlines.
I think we picked on them last time.
We'll mention them again. So their chatbot on their website had said someone could have a refund on a ticket. And the reason why it made the news is because it was ruled that the chatbot was essentially a service representative for the company, and so it had to the company had to uphold what the chatbot had said. So be aware of that. People will be looking to deploy chatbots.
And this comes back to kind of the piece around, we turn it back to governance for a second, because governance and management of that data that you're going to use to educate your learning model, whatever it is, it's important that our information is accurate. It's important it's up to date. And that the Canada Airlines story kind of came about, and again, sorry, Canada Airlines, if it wasn't you, but airline company from Canada, but they, because they were teaching their model on out-of-date information, it was then giving out-of-date information, which led to them having to then honour the out-of-date information. Yeah. We've seen it so recently. We've had issues recently with Google where they've tried to put kind of guardrails around bias, but have ended up flipping so far the other way. They were just giving inaccurate information the other way. Go look up the comparing Elon Musk to terrible people in history kind of example. But and so I think understanding what that data is, and it kind of feeds in all the things we talked about. Understand why you want to use this kind of stuff. So, I think it's a good quote actually about allow imagination to run wild, but don't allow it to run too wild kind of thing. But understand the things that you want out of it, and then understand what does that mean in terms of the data that we're sharing with our learning model. And then also consider, is that the right data? Because I think there's also questions around the security of the information. So, making sure that because I know one of the issues that, or one of the concerns people have with this kind of thing is that, is it going to return information that to people who shouldn't see the information that's been returned? So is it going to give
within the organisation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that, that can obviously stretch kind of public facing. So I think there's a few things, isn't there, for people to consider. I think, is absolutely kind of the ethical use of AI, and I think that's particularly relevant for people who are, way cleverer than I am now building these kind of AI models, as opposed to somebody like me who might be consuming Copilot or consuming ChatGPT. So I think there's a difference in that. But for those, because I think in most cases people are going to be consuming the technology. So think about, if you're consuming it internally, what does internal consumption look like? What are we teaching it? And are we protecting the data sets we don't want our AI model looking at appropriately? So it can't just, so a Microsoft Copilot can't just see everything. And then I think we've got that piece around, and how do we then make sure that if we're going to allow people to use these kind of AI tools externally, so let them use ChatGPT, for example, how do we make sure we do that responsibly so we protect important corporate information, so private information about our employees and our staff, intellectual property? How do we make sure that that's not overshared on these platforms? And while not suggesting for a moment that, OpenAI are busy stealing all that data to monetize it and do something with it, that data does go into their learning model and might come out as an answer somewhere in a way you'd not expect it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I thought you were going to add more to it than that.
No, I was just considering what you were saying there. I mean, I was using ChatGPT this morning, actually. And, one thing's in the iPhone app, they're constantly advertising, GoPro, GoPro, GoPro. And it's kind of like, okay, I can go pro and I'll get the latest model. But that latest model is based upon how the older model has grown, and the way that grows is input from people using it. So there's always that risk that, data will be exposed where you don't want it to be.
Well, do you want to give, as we come to the end of our time here, do you want to give a little bit of a, the end of this episode? I mean, end of our time sounded quite ominous, didn't it? It sounds like the end of the world.
Skynet's taken over.
Indeed, yeah. AI's been listening.
Yeah.
But I mean, is there a couple of takeaways that you want to share with the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, the main one for me is, as we've been doing at Gardeners, look at AI as a tool. They can help you, but be conscious of what you're putting in it and have a plan for it. People are using AI within your business, regardless of whether you've formally signed it off or not. Be aware of that. Have a conversation with, developers, people that are working with data in your company. Are you using AI in any form? Yes. Okay. If the answer is yes from anyone that you ask, you will need to have a plan as to what data can be going into there. Or maybe you end up onboarding something like Copilot in a more formal, strategic way to say, we're not going to use the free version of ChatGPT. We're going to use the paid-for version of Copilot in a secure enclave with our company data with the correct right setup.
Well, I think I'll give a takeaway as well, but I'm going to pinch something you said earlier on, is get the kind of governance policies right before you start rolling out AI, before it's too late. That's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah.
But do that thing first. Don't roll out AI across your entire business and then decide how you're going to come back and govern it. We've been there. We've done that when everybody rolled out Teams because they all needed to work from home, and then you spent 2 years fixing rolling out Teams. Think about that. Think about it first. So, Jace, hey, you settled back in really well.
Great to be back.
Nice to have you back.
Yeah, I've missed it.
Yeah, smelling the babies. You fill your own gaps in what smelling the babies is like. But great to have you back, Jace.
Thank you.
So if you want to make sure you catch all future episodes of Tech Takeaways, then do subscribe. You can subscribe here on YouTube, or you can subscribe in the podcast app of your choice. But until next time, thanks for watching.